people and some people who attended the session yesterday. One thing that we didn't really get to do yesterday was to kind of present a little bit life itself. So I'll just take a first 2 minutes to kind of like give a little bit of context, and then we'll move a little, I'll recap what we covered roughly yesterday to give a bit of context for people who didn't join, but also to refresh in our own mind for people who were there yesterday. And then we'll dive deeper into the politics of being. So for that, I'm gonna share screen with everyone, if that's, I think I'll just do like that. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we started in 2015, and we are 3 people behind who were initiating this project, myself, Rufus, and Liam Cavagna, who was there yesterday, a combination of artist, entrepreneur, and cognitive scientists. And I guess the 3 of us all had a question that moved us, which was a quest around what is wisdom and how can we live more wisely in the world. Today, we're now a graded team of people who actually work, and this was our last gathering that was finished about less than a week ago, of people here in one of our new hub in the center of Bergerac. And we also have 3 hubs, one in Berlin, one in London, and one in Bergerac in the countryside. And but basically where it's our community get to live together and pursue practices, and also have conversation, and maybe also create more events around the question of how do we live wisely, both practically as a community, and how can we engage with the broader world into bringing this question and pursuit of wisdom with broader society. And we also have an institute which Liam is leading on. And basically it is what it's written there. It's a think tank dedicated to rigorously examining how we can get wiser. Getting wiser is central to addressing critical challenges ranging from mental health to climate change. But we don't value, examine, research, or cultivate wisdom systematically, practically, and in the mainstream. Wisdom maybe is still viewed kind of as a woo-woo science with crystals and everything. And we want to kind of bring the question of wisdom into the mainstream, as that for that to be seen seriously, and that it's examined scientifically and rigorously. And there are also other realms that we touch, but I would say that that kind of summarize maybe points of what life itself is currently and is about. So I will swap. Yeah.
So let's just pause. Let's come back. Let's stop screen sharing for a moment. Just to check before we go on. So are there any questions just before we move on? If there are any immediate things on that before we come back and recap a bit from yesterday and then move on? Great. I'll check if you do write in the chat notice. I just want to say, so like, first of all, are you going to do the recap, or do you want me to recap a little bit? You prefer?
I can do the recap, and if I miss things, we can
I mean, let me just create the intention for today's session and just for people. So because we have some people who are rejoining, it will still be valuable. We're going to kind of cover some of the same ground. It sounds like most people are new, but the intention of this session is it's the beginning of a journey. One of our, even to kind of come in the session, one of our tendencies, and I can certainly speak for myself, but generally in the modern world is we tend to rush a lot. For a good friend of mine says is that we do the things fast that we should do slow, and we do the things slow that we should do fast, particularly in politics. And this is therefore the beginning of a conversation about how we could reimagine politics, how we could have a wiser politics and a wiser society. And that, and this is a kind of just flag that you're not going to get, there's not going to be the magic answer at the end of this session, just saying, hey, this is how we fix everything. So just to say, it's the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah. And I think if you do meet someone who says, it managed to explain to you in 1 hour, this is how we fix everything, you should run for the hills. Because touching something as complex as human being and the challenges that we have, being able to boil that in an hour is would be meaning that you miss some big things, probably.
Great. Do you want to kick off with the recap?
Yeah, if that's okay with people, you can just like do a wave or... Great, let's go. So I will use the share screen also from yesterday's. I think we can go here. Can you see all okay?
You want to go to present?
Yeah. So basically, it's coming up. Okay, here we go. So basically, yesterday we were touching part 1, which was, hey, we do have a problem. Obviously, there's a climate crisis that is hitting us, and that is actually happening right here, right now, in California. And in the past years, we've really started seeing more and more of the impact. And we can also see it also through the form of like the global health crisis, of how it has been, for example, the differences also of how it's been handled, for example, in the US compared to Taiwan, which shows that different culture, responds differently to different situations. And so if first is like we have a problem, what is really at the root cause of these problems? And I think first looking from a bigger perspective, we're now going to look at how is it that we human being responds to problem as an individual level. And so we looked a little bit at this example of a woman. What? Sorry. No. What? Oh. Aha, this is better. I can see your face at the top there. So there was this case of this woman who basically came in because she wanted to lose weight. And she went on a dieting program, basically, and lose a substantial amount of weight. And after a few weeks of finishing her program...
a year later, 51 weeks later, so a year later.
Yeah, her program. How about you explain that?
Yes,
part?
okay, that's fine. That's great. That's fine. So yeah, so just to recap for people from yesterday and for new people. So what I want to say is that this woman walks in. She has severe obesity. This was a clinic, and it was a weight loss program, no surgery, but it had really dramatic results. It had been one that they'd been developing for some time. But the point of this story is so great. A year later, she walks out, the woman on the right in this picture from the woman on the left. Great. Problem solved, right? Except something went wrong. So when there was a follow-up meeting with the woman about, in fact, about a couple of months later, she'd regained more weight than he thought was biologically possible in such a short time. What happened? And it turned out when he asked her that basically her newly svelte, thinner body had attracted a male co-worker who had started to flirt with her and then suggested kind of going out or having sex. That's what had happened. And she went home and began to eat. And she stuffed herself during the day and she ate while sleepwalking at night. And she gained about something like 20 kilos within about a 2-month period, which is almost incredible. It's hard to eat that amount of food. And why was this? They kind of asked her. And so one of the things that they said was that Felitti, who was running the study, who was the chief physician, and he really looked with her. She revealed that she had a lengthy incest history with her grandfather. Her grandfather had sexually abused her as a young girl. That was the only second case that Felitti had encountered in 23 years of doing medicine. Yet only 10 days later, he heard a similar story from another patient in the weight loss program. And he discovered that most of their morbidly obese patients had been sexually abused as children. And they also encountered a host of other family problems. So the thing about this story that I really want to get is that we can mistake the symptoms for the disease. So in this case, the woman said, oh, I'm fat, that's the problem. I'm morbidly obese, I want to deal with that. But in fact, that wasn't the issue, because he said 12 years after treating her, Felice saw the woman again, because she disappeared after he saw her that time and she dropped out of the program. She'd actually had bariatric surgery, you know, actual surgical technique to reduce weight. She'd lost 96 pounds and become suicidal. She'd had 5 psychiatric hospitalizations and 3 courses of electroshock to control her suicidality. And he points out that obesity, which is considered a major public health problem, may in fact be a partial solution for many people. So if you mistake the symptoms for a problem to be eliminated, not only are they likely to fail, but you can actually make the situation worse. This woman became suicidal. And maybe a really good metaphor for that would be, you know, which I mentioned also yesterday, which is, imagine you're in a house right now, right? And you start seeing smoke coming in the door. And you think, oh my God, it's getting very smoky in here. I'm going to get some fans and I'm going to start blowing the smoke out the window. That's how I'm going to deal with the smoke. What might go on? Well, if your house is actually on fire, you've just made the fire worse. You just started blowing air into your fire. And that's often what we could be doing, is we've mistaken the symptom, the smoke, for the actual disease, which is the fire. And as again, one female rape victim told Felice, overweight is overlooked, and that's the way I need to be. Now, let's come to the next. So the point about this is about blind spots. The point of this story, and I think it's a very, very powerful and very tragic story in many ways, is what we don't know, and we don't know that we don't know. This woman didn't come in and say, hey, I had this incredible childhood trauma and I need to deal with that. And it's, as a consequence, I also want that I'll get control of my weight. No, she came in and said, hey, the problem is my obesity. Often we're not aware of the blind spots that we have. That part of the whole thing is strictly a blind spot is something we can't see, and we can't see that we can't see.
It's maybe in our personal life, it can look like, oh, why is it that I don't always end up dating a girl that have emotional problem? Oh, it's because like I have a relation, like I see that my mom, although I have a great relationship with my mom, I see that my mom is broken and I have to fix her. Therefore, I end up always trying to fix women I'm with. Or so, it can be like related to work, but it's like we try to treat the symptoms, right? And what is at the origin of it individually. But that's also what we do collectively with problems such as climate change, and also other points. So that's the link that we were trying to wrap.
So I just, it's good. So just to emphasize, so blind spots show up and they have this, but they're obviously difficult to see. So how do we discern them? Well, you see stuckness. Where are you stuck in your life? Where are we stuck in our lives? Where can we not break out of some kind of destructive behavior? Where can we not create a new future? And as I said, that's how we can discern blind spots. They may arise from trauma, but also simply as part of our humanity. We live with filters always as human beings about it. I mean, just think about a moment, and you know, if I tell you I'm English, what do you immediately there for you? If someone would just say, what's immediately there for you if I say, hey, I'm English?
And you can unmute yourself. What do you think about English people?
Just immediately.
Sure, it's better weather to go to Bergerac than staying where you came from.
Yeah, exactly. It's cold and wet. Yeah, brilliant. Anyone else? What's there just immediately for you?
You colonize with your language.
We colonize our language, right? Yeah.
Everyone has to speak English.
Everyone has to speak English. Anyone else? What's just immediately there? Like, for example, do you think Englishmen romantic, passionate?
Football and pubs.
Pubs,
I think it was
exactly. Now, there's just an occurring of how an English person is. It's just, but you weren't born like that. You weren't like, you didn't come out of the, you know, you were born in the, you know, in the hospital, and they're like, oh, you were, no, we have these kind of filters that get created that shape how we see the world, right? It doesn't have to just be, you know, that. So to come back then to the example here, so where are you stuck in your life? This is something, and today I'm going to move on, but you could look for yourself, like, where are you stuck in your life? But today I want to look is why the purpose of this story, which you might be at personal stuckness, is this analogy for where we're stuck collectively. And, you know, where, just as a moment here, I want to just go around, where do you think we're stuck collectively as societies? Where, so I just want to give you, I'm going to give people a moment. I'm going to give one example that I mentioned before, the climate crisis. I think most people would say, yeah, we're stuck. Like, it's not like we're resolving the climate change issue really effectively and rapidly. You know, there's a lot of, we don't move forward, we don't have agreements, you know, Kyoto didn't get signed, COP21 was okay, but it was a bit of a cop-out. We're still emitting more CO2 than we should. You know, it's not like a sense that we're
dealing with it.
We're stuck in the mud. So I just want to put people, and Hannah, if we get ready here to put people in rooms of 3, I want people to speculate for, let's give everyone about like 8 minutes. I want you to come back just to think, where in our society do you think we're stuck? Like, what issues where you feel there's a stuckness, there's a lack of possibility, there's a lack of movement?
Or there's hurt also, like hurt is often like...
Something's not working, we put something off.
With each other, and especially the lack of empathy was recognized as a big problem, and that was kind of apparent in a lot of stuff, like, for example, that we don't really consider other species or non-human animals, or that we don't really consider future generations, or like a long-term aspects of our decisions, and that's partly because we can't really...
Wait, just wait a moment. Because so the question is, where are you stuck? Not why, not what's going on in the background, because you're all such smart people here. Where are we actually stuck? Like, where's a concrete example in that group of where we're stuck? Like, where we're not doing something, like, that we want to do as a group, community, like as a collective?
Well, I guess the problems are you know, the usual suspects, you know, climate change and other global problems. And
what are the other global problems? Like, give me a concrete example of where we're not making the progress we want to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what our discussion focused on, but I'm not sure. Maybe others from the group can join in.
Okay, great. I mean, it's not wrong. It's like getting to the meatiness of it. It's like it's gonna make it. So where, yeah, just anyone, like, where, yeah.
One
So
of
you're
the
looking for specific issues?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that the person that was going to talk, he was going to bring up that that came up in our group. Was it Vincent? Yeah. Go ahead.
No, please.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Because we were discussing first, it came up in our group actually, like the prison system, and that it's something that is like nowadays based on punishment, and that it could be done like differently. And this was like the more specific case in our discussion. The rest of things we talked more about, like how how we put everything into boxes and categorize everything. So that kind of creates an impediment to move forward in a way, and to just wanting to go back to normal or having like a new normal, but everything's still in boxes and not exactly like taking a leap forward.
Great. Okay, so that's one big subject. It's like you're saying around prisons, but basically how we deal. what I'm hearing is that the stuckness is that we could have a really different system of like reforming, or like, you know, where we kind of end up just locking people up or something like that. That's like, we could have a different kind of system, but we've been stuck in this old one, which goes back 200 years or something like that.
Great.
Great. Okay. Anyone else? Go for it. Yay.
Please, Andrea, because we were two, myself and Andrea, and he just opened up, of course, from more holistic and philosophical perspective, but we touched upon the issue of, let's say, how we are as an individual, as a structure, have tendency to go with the...
Wait. I've just got, because you guys, wow, like there's just so much intellectual firepower here that we're in. Where concretely are we stuck? Like, if I were to look out there, like, you know, like, let's say at a personal level, I'd say, oh, I've got these issues with my parents, and that, you know, this would be abstract. The concrete would be, none of my relationships last longer than 2 months. That would be a concrete area where I was stuck. I really want to be in a great romantic relationship and they last 2 months. Or, you know, I want my business to grow, but I just keep like losing money. Or I'd like to have a collaborator that I can collaborate with in my artist, as an artist, but I always fall out with my collaborators after, you know, and just again and again, I look for a great collaborator. It seems great for like half a year and then it ends, or something like that. Where's something concrete?
Okay.
Okay, discrimination. We came up with discrimination. We came up with clashes between classes, ruling classes and working classes. Even if it's not through protest, there is still the clash. For example, there is a clash between young generation and the pensionat. Yes. We don't know it, but it is like this, you know, because there are too much money going to the pensionat because we are growing older and older. Right. And then, for example, in some countries, there is a lack of works because of this. They cannot employ a lot of young people because the state has to give the money to the old people.
Well, so let me get really concrete there, because it's really great. There is a need, like just if people are aware that Andrea is referring to reform the social security system, because get into the technical detail, but how it got set up in most countries, at least in the Western Europe or in the US, basically 50 to 100 years ago, like in the first half of the 20th century, is not sustainable financially, at least in its current setup. You know, and so where there's a stuckness is we know we need to reform that. People have talked about that for 30 years, 20 years, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of progress, like at the present. It's like most of the countries are going to go bankrupt. I mean, yeah.
And the last thing was, Rufus, that we are stuck in systematic hierarchies.
Yeah.
Because we create systems and we continue to create hierarchies. And this is what is, for me, detrimental to the evolution of society today.
Right. But that stuckness shows up as maybe in like stubborn levels of inequality that never get resolved. Resentment, like what it actually looks like is anger or resentment that never gets resolved.
Yeah. That's then it's, you know, we don't look anymore inward, and then we have all this unempathic relationship with the others.
Great. That's really, really great example. And I think we can, now that we kind of start having example, we can see there's so many of them, for example, like, and why we say is to be precise is like, we can talk about after, is like, but what does it look like out there in the world? If I had a camera and I had to film what the stuckness look like, is like, for example, the inequality of Black Lives Matters. Like that, you see there's a stuckness there. And that's how, unresolved for centuries. And that's what, like, if I have a camera, that's where the stuckness look like. Homelessness, you know, like immigrations, that's what it looks like out there. So there's a lot more we can see, but now we can start to have like, oh, these are maybe the symptom of blind spots. Our issue regarding authority, like these are symptoms of blind spots. And we might not be able to cover all the blind spots that we have, but we may touch upon a few.
So I want to come back. What I want us to do is to come back to climate change for today. That we could cover all of them. And this is what would a systematic program, I think, of looking at our stuckness would look like, as we could go through all of them. But let's come back to climate change, because it's a very, or climate crisis is very common and very familiar and well known, and there's not a lot of debate that it, I think anyone who thinks that we're not stuck there.
Can I ask you a question? Just
Yeah.
try to understand. I think it's very important that we know the concreteness, the how we should look at the concrete level, and so that we can ground ourselves. So I just run few things. So I just want to get the feel whether what that is concrete enough or not. Okay. The oppressor oppressed the dialogue, is it abstract? Too abstract? Because if it's the class one, everything else is like oppressor versus oppressed, then you can put it into the language of the colonialism. What's happening at the drinking problem with the Aborigine so like which layer should we talk about when you say concrete?
So just to say, I would say like, oh, oppression between groups is quite abstract. Like something like where we're stuck is, group, like, oh, we've got alcoholism. That's this stubborn problem of alcoholism that we don't seem to get resolved. We don't get resolved, maybe these traumas that led to it, that we haven't really got resolved from, centuries ago. That would be the stuckness. So the stuckness would show up like, oh my God, we still have this alcoholism problem, or alcoholism, whether we call it a problem or not, that we're trying to resolve, that we want to resolve, and we're not.
Okay. Instead of extracting the sum of the common theme, so the meta of the symptoms or the causes, you actually don't want us to become meta mindset. So you actually forget about the meta specific thing. So it cannot transcend the other things. Just okay. So that's the layer you want us to walk from. Okay.
Yes, we can come to that. We will come to that. But there's a tendency to go to that abstract level. At the abstract level, it's not very powerful as a conversational domain, but it's also kind of difficult to do much there. But yeah, so let's stay in the concreteness for now. Yes.
Maybe analogy, like if a child makes a painting and I just say, oh, I don't like this painting, or this painting is not good, what are they gonna do? But if you say, oh, like, how about you add a bit more black on the right corner? Then you can actually, add more black on the right corner. It's like it's by being specific of saying like that you can actually start to have agency. Because the abstract level can be quite disempowering and just say, yes, there's a problem. And what?
I don't want to dominate the airspace or the airtime, but I just wanted to understand the framing, right? So you're talking about the framing of the things, and you wanted to get to the point that it's actionable. Like so, the action layer, instead of saying that this is abstract, so climate issue is still too. Then it sounds like too abstract. So it has to go down to the specific action within the climate.
I don't think we could get specific. So let's say on the climate crisis, you say the stuckness is that for a long time, relatively, so let's say now 20 or 30 years, we have had general agreement that we need to radically reduce the level of carbon emissions and stabilize the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, probably around 350 parts per million, preferably, yeah? In order to not have the risk of catastrophic warming and climate, or very risky warming of the planet. And we haven't achieved that. And we're still discussing, we don't even have binding targets on emissions levels. We have a kind of semi-binding target on warming that we've already probably surpassed. But that's a stuckness. We don't have an internationally binding agreement to which the world's major emitters are all party to. That's a stuckness, yeah, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Great. So let's come to the next part. Yeah, here we go. Can I?
Yeah, you can.
Thank you. So here we go. So I kind of want to come to this case of climate crisis. I want us to ask together now, if we're all agreed we're stuck in on the climate issue. I've given an example of what stuckness might agree on. And one of the reasons I was asked this is, you know, people have different ideas of the ways we're stuck. But if so, I want to ask, like, where exactly? So, you know, like, let's say we got a bit more, let's go back to me. Imagine, you know, my poor love life isn't going well. I'm stuck. I keep ending up in these relationships that end after 2 months. I really want to be in a loving long-term relationship, but I'm just not, right? But you could kind of look in a bit more detail about where I'm stuck. You might say, hey, Rufus, where you're stuck is you just don't, you don't go on enough dates. Like, you kind of just go out with the first person that you meet, and then of course it doesn't work well. You just, you're stuck because you're not able to go out and really go on enough dates and be vulnerable and open. Or where you're stuck is you're not willing to compromise. You're not willing to, like, the moment they don't do things the way you like or whatever. So I want to just take a moment. We're going to do it together. Where are we stuck around climate change? Like, where do you, and whose fault is it? Who's stick? Where, my other stuckness might be, the people, like, women are just not right. That might be the other stuckness. Women are just not right for me. They're just, no woman is the right way that I need them to be. That could be my stuck. That could be blaming the women. There are lots of ways we could be. So, for example, one way we might be is like, it's the United States' fault. If the United States had ratified Kyoto in '97, we'd all be good. It's like the United States' fault. And in particular, it's those Republican, whatever, you can have a story like that. So I kind of want to just go around, and if people want to put up their hand of like, why are we, where are we stuck on climate change? Not maybe so much, I know it kind of relates to why, but like where's the exact stuckness for us?
Well, I mean, just to piggyback of what you just said, I just wanted to say that I think playing the blame game is partly the problem, that we are seeking for someone to blame when it should be something that where we, cooperate collectively. But yeah, what does that mean on micro level? I'm not really sure. I mean, there's a lot of different, things we can do.
Can I ask a question? So let's say in Finland, do you think that Finland is doing enough or is doing everything it should about climate change?
We aren't doing enough.
Well, or you're not?
You're not.
Okay, and so where are you stuck in Finland? What's in the way of Finland doing enough on climate change?
Well, okay, a big problem is the peat, the usage of peat that causes a lot of emissions, burning of peat. And where we talk on that, there's political coalitions which are very much opposed to that. And I guess the way to kind of fix that is through a fair transition where the peat workers are somehow compensated, or there's retraining or something of that sort, where they don't just lose their livelihood. Great, got it. So there's some people who are going to lose their jobs or have some issue if peat burning doesn't happen anymore, and there's some coalition, you said political coalition, who's kind of protecting them or something. Sure.
And which is that political coalition exactly?
Well, in the current government, there's one party called Keskusta, the centrist party, which is very much they are very much their whole support is based on the kind of farmers and the people in the countryside. Got
it. Okay, great. So that's very concrete. So the stuckness relates, there's some group who are going to lose out, and there's a party that kind of represents them, and that party's in government and needs to be dealt with. Okay, got it. Yeah, great.
That's very specific. That's great.
Anyone else?
Flying and airline travel.
Great.
Fracking, biomass, all this.
Food waste, 40% of food waste globally.
Yeah, waste, yeah, all this.
Dairy industry and meat consumption.
Okay, that's really great. So just let's just kind of take some of this. So we'll go. That was just brilliant. Like, so Vincent, you were saying that the airlines. So tell me a bit, like, where are we stuck about? So airlines. So I understand, like, airlines are big emitters of carbon dioxide. So where are we stuck about doing something about airline emissions?
We've built a global society which requires a connection across the world between different cultures for understanding commerce, geopolitical reasons, you name it. We're very dependent on physical meetings in a lot of parts, and understandably so. We do like physical interactions as human beings. And that requires, because of the time scale that we want our lives to be in, as in I'm not going to take several months to cross continents or an ocean or something like that. We're used to that level of speed. That means flying.
Great. That's just amazing. Okay, so the stuckness is that what, if I really boiled it down though, just to level back, because you very quickly went to a very point we're going to come to, which was great. But even before that is fundamentally, we could change airline travel quite radically and its emissions. We could price the cost of, we could put a tax or whatever it was that would represent some of the costs and would change people's behavior. But what you're saying is that wouldn't be popular politically. A party that did that would get voted out of power basically by their constituency if they started enacting those kind of like tariffs on travel, because it would block commerce and stuff like that. I mean, at the concrete level, the stuckness is because we're not able to do something because it's not like the politicians are bad. It's just if they did something on that, they'd have problems. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put all the weight of that on the shoulders of politicians.
No, I'm not.
We also don't, but
yeah.
No, but I mean, like, that's not the only leverage there is to change this. I mean, consumers could, industries could self-regulate. We could, there's other things, and just looking at that one, that's already a solution in a way. But sure.
But we people, for example, have debated, and it's been explicitly excluded from international agreements. And for example, the EU sought to impose regulated pricing of airlines in the emissions trading scheme in the early 2010s, and they were fought back by the US and Russia. So there were particular groups that specifically stopped that happening. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't be overcome in some way. People didn't want to go it alone. I got it. And then we said about the dairy industry in it. So I'd love to, like, where are we stuck there, or the meat eating? It's like, is that right? What's the issue, and where are we stuck? Yeah,
I mean, it's in a way, it's almost a bit like the airlines. It's a lobby also. So and a bit like the peat also. There's a lot of the economy. A lot of people are depending on that because their jobs are depending on that. So like, what alternatives can you find? But this is also like it was mentioned that it's not just about politicians, so the consumers can have true impact on these matters. So you can actually choose not to eat meat or to reduce your consumption, or you can choose not to support like dairy industry. So yeah, but it's I don't know exactly like how you can put the thing on what's stopping us or what's making us stuck, because there's other issues around that, like culture and traditions and things like that. So it's a big issue.
We're going to have to come to Seda, I think. Jada, I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, correct. Thank you.
Just, so what would you like to see happen? Even just for you, what would you like to see happen around the dairy industry? Like, where are we stuck for you at least? Like, you would like to have this happen and it's not happening.
Well, I'm a vegetarian myself for more than 30 years, so I don't know where we stuck as an individual, and I have some kind of difficulties in understanding this, considering the complexity of the issues that we are talking about. Would it be really wise to really pinpoint this stuckness in the process? I appreciate everything has said, and in general, I would say for the climate thing, we maybe as an individual, let's say me, myself, we are a little bit stuck in buying the arguments said that if we as individuals do this and that, the world will be much more better, without really pushing the pressure on the big players, big polluters, and ask them to be accountable. Of course, we should do what we need to do, that's for sure, as an individual responsibility, but I feel that this kind of narrative comes from every direction, and then we are not giving a kind of real space and possibility really to create a pressure group on the bigger players of the issue. I mean, this is a bit, from my understanding, maybe general stuckness is somehow in us. I don't know.
So by recap, it's like a stuckness in believing that, oh, individual in their own house can do it, and not kind of being like, okay, let's ourselves come together and like hold groups or a government accountable. And then maybe lastly, Verena, before we
come to the next one. Yeah.
Next to our next one. Verena, yeah?
Yeah, just to sum that up, from the lobbies that Ines said and Shada, requiring pressure on those, because probably some of you of yesterday's groups also work with enterprises and know how these things work. In Germany, I see we're stuck on satisfying the needs of two lobbies, basically, minimum, but definitely the cars and beer. And you won't stop having Germany produce that. Even if the individual might step back, two people less buy a car, but the industries are so strong to seduce us to continue consuming it. So the power of these industries, as Shada says, is so enormous that the manipulation on the individual, on the more or less reflected individual, right, is extraordinary. And so has to be the pressure then on these groups, on these producers, on these lobbies, on the other hand, to put them in their limits, to regulate, as Vincent said, to find a regulation also in the industry.
Right. So, I mean, I think people have been saying stuff that we're about to come to in a moment. I'll just make a comment, because we're about to, one thing that I think we're stuck sometimes there is in a resignation. I think both, you just kind of say, Jegna and I'm not doing great on them, and Andrea was like, the problem's so big, the opposition is so big, etc. And I just want to we're about to come to the next section, so I want to make a comment, which is, imagine you went back in a time machine to, let's say, 1700 or 1650. And you step out, maybe I know the UK history better, but you could have been in France, or you could have been in the UK, England, or you could have been in Germany, didn't have, but you said, listen, there's this problem of there's this slavery in the Caribbean, or there's slavery going on. There's all these tens of thousands of people, by 1700, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who are enslaved. There are people being enslaved all over the world. There are people enslaved in China. There are people enslaved in North Africa. And it's like, well, there's these huge lobbies. There's these people who make vast amounts of money with their slaves on the slave plantations. There's shipping, the biggest industry of England is shipping, and the ships are used to ship people around. It's a very profitable business. And it's always been like this. It's always been it. And, it's so tough. It's never good. And it's like, and then, to us today, it's just obviously barbaric that you would have people in slavery. I mean, maybe discussion modern day slavery and stuff, but there's almost no formal legal slavery in the world. Whereas you go back 300 years, most places had formal legal slavery. And there were extremely organized pressure groups and lobbying groups around slavery. Extremely effective groups that had a lot at stake about that. And yet it did change. And that, you know, one question would be, how did that change? So I want to come to our next slide and ask, you know, because I think everything everyone has said is absolutely correct. And so I want to come to like, why we start really, like, I'm not saying that any of the things people have said, everything everyone said is correct. Like that woman had an obesity problem. And many of you started pointing to, I think because you're so also intelligent and quite experienced, to some of the things beneath it. But for example, many of you discussed that we couldn't resolve basically political impasses. There's something we could do, there's something we should do, but there's too big a lobby group, or it would involve too much, you know, it's difficult. There's the peat farmers or burners, and there's the centrist party. I mean, it's just a classic story. You know, we're now 30 years into the climate crisis. It's like dramatically obvious, yet the centrist party in Finland is blocking action on climate change. You're one of the most progressive countries in the world, one of the most liberal, one of the most open-minded, is not doing everything it could on climate change right now because of peat farmers. I mean, wow. And so why we start really, what are the implicit values and views, and where did they come from? So I'm going to just give you a little analogy, and I think you could find the story. So just to go back to the story of that woman, her real diagnosis problem was obesity. So our real immediate problem is we're not doing stuff on climate change nearly fast enough. We're not limiting carbon emissions. And that's what we've come to doctor with. We're like, hey, doctor, we just can't, you know, regulate aviation tariffs. We can't limit stuff. But what's our problem? But what's behind that? What are the trauma that we're actually dealing with? I'm going to give one example. So let's pick the United States, which has probably been, I'll speak frankly, at least in developed countries, the single biggest obstacle in the last 20 to 30 years in action on climate change of a developed country. For a variety of reasons, they didn't ratify Kyoto, which the European Union did ratify, which most other countries, it was one of the reasons it didn't go into force very quickly in '97. I could go on at length. They didn't really take part in, 2009 in Copenhagen, etc. Now, if you look at the United States just for a moment, what was the original trauma for the United States? So the United States was created in the modern form. I don't mean the question of Native Americans or American Indians. I just mean like the modern Northern European settlers. It was settled by mainly at the beginning English. I mean, there were French as well, but the dominant group who's become dominant in the United States were English-speaking settlers from England between the period of around 1600 and 1660 or 1680. Now, why did they leave England? Does anyone know why they left England? It's a bit of a hint on here. Anyone want to say? Have a guess?
Poverty and religious persecution?
Yeah. Like execution, threat of execution. I mean, the first group, which went to Massachusetts, were Puritans who were being oppressed by Charles I and by, literally, not able to practice, executed, etc. And then the second group, who went to Virginia, who were the slave owner type, came from Bristol, and they were royalists. They were the other side. They were the group that lost the Civil War to the Puritans, but they were fleeing persecution as well, right? So the obsessive trope of American culture is liberty. The obsession of America and the US is liberty, and liberty from government often. Now imagine that your obsession is, your original trauma is persecution by government. What's your kind of attitude to governmental agreements, particularly international ones? What's the general tenor of your politics regarding government regulation and organization? It's like immediate. It's like the woman who some guy flirts with her in the restaurant and she starts eating. It's just going to be fundamental and automatic distrust and dislike. And it means that, for example, in the United States, even in the legal political setup, to agree to an international treaty takes 2/3 of the majority of the Senate. That's a really high bar. That's why they didn't ratify Kyoto. So just to explain that you could, I'm just making a suggestive argument. I'm not saying this is all of the answer, but you could make a very compelling argument that one of the reasons it's so difficult for the US to take part in international agreements or government, think of the right wing, big government, killing jobs, regulation, goes back to religious persecution 300 and 400 years ago. So I want to ask people here is just for a moment, I don't know whether we have time.
One thing I wanted to add is, and we're not saying United States to blame, point the finger to the United States, is more, we need to be highly aware that the United States has been a leader in culture forming worldwide
for the last 50 years.
50 years. What we watch is American movies.
What happens in American movies?
Bad governments are going to take us, and a lone wolf is going to fight it and take over and be able to make it just. And these narrative, rock and roll is highly individualist. It's like, I'm free to get drunk and have sex whenever I want and fuck the system. And this narrative of, liberty and freedom as the ultimate thing to pursue has also, trickled down to, larger, like
the whole world.
The whole world. I am free to buy whatever I want, whenever I want.
I'm free to fly wherever I want, whenever I want.
You can't tell me what to do. And this dominant culture that is has a fear of government oppression and the obsession with liberty has also trickled down and has also shown up in the rest and other parts of the world.
And it's amazing, just to be clear, was amazing in loads of ways, is amazing in loads of ways. There was oppressive government. There was government with lots of religious persecution. So just to emphasize that, so as Sylvie said, and so it's kind of like, it's the water in which we swim. Can you think of American film or major Hollywood film in which there is a heroic government bureaucrat who isn't a lone wolf protesting against the system, but there's a heroic government department, the Avengers. If you think of major Hollywood blockbusters, what happens? The government's a bit useless, and then there are these kind of Caped Crusaders who save the day. Anyway, I want us to take some time now, maybe just for a minute, and have what other values or views, what other traumas do you think that we have suffered collectively in our societies stand in our way of the collective action that we would need to address climate change? Because it's actually very simple to address climate change. We just need to limit the amount of carbon dioxide we put in the atmosphere every year. It's not easy, simple, but what's in the way, and what do you think is kind of the really there, the implicit values and views that are behind the immediate stuckness? And maybe just take a minute in silence to maybe brainstorm or write something down, then we can do sharing. Who would like to share? Verena.
Well, one trauma theory that goes back about 25,000 years ago with sedentarism.
Yeah.
The moment we start to consider the earth ours and to consider human the one to make use of it instead of being depending on it on our side.
Yeah, great. So, I think, I don't know, just to add for the end, I don't know if people, I can't remember it by heart, but the beginning of Genesis in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in suffering you will bring, when they're cast out of Eden, which is sort of, you could see as a metaphor, in suffering you will bring forth, I can't remember, you will till the land, etc. Like there's this kind of trauma, but also of it. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a big one. our disconnection from nature, basically, as a way of
being
seeing.
separated from nature, not one.
Well, we're always connected to nature, I think, as a matter of fact, but the positioning of ourselves in the scale.
Yes. Yes.
Hierarchy.
Yes. Okay, who else would like to share? It's great.
I can share one, I think.
Otto was going to share. Otto.
Yeah, I had the same about the hierarchy in my mind also, but then I don't know where the trauma comes from, but the individualism and that individuals in a way represent them through consumption. I don't know where the trauma against collectivism comes from, but that's something.
I think it's funny because of one that I was about to say. I think the individualism symptom is the trauma from the collective. I think there's been huge trauma about the collective, and such as communism is like, you know, it was really a powerful dream that went really, really south, and we don't trust the group anymore. Like we, you know, fear of like, oh my God, things could be a cult. If the group comes together, we'll submit our free will. And the best way to keep my free will is to be an individual. I think we have a lot of trauma about groups. And one, I would say, like the failure of communism has had, you know, taints to that. And even I think the trauma of the Inquisition in Europe, the religious war, so that we're disconnected from our spirituality. That, you know, religion is like it's oppressive, it's something terrible. So we have to be secular. Any other traumas that people might see?
And also maybe to put that the Enlightenment era view of freedom was built basically above individuals and not like collective freedom. I think that's something that's also causing the trauma in that.
And just to be safe, because it can seem kind of abstract, I just want to like, this is the collective action problem, the mother of all collective problems. You know, like it's it's global. It's different people suffer it differently. You know, it might even be good for Finland, but not good for sub-Saharan Africa. You know, like, no, I don't mean it for, I'm just picking fit, but, you know, some places might benefit from climate, you know, warming Earth at least in the near term. It's a really tough problem. It involves it's a problem where we're really going to need to be powerfully kind of and generously collective. You know, need to think of our children's children or someone in another place, you know, and it's, you know, we don't have a lot of practice of that. And we have a lot of stuff about the collective, you know, being taken advantage of, you know, whatever it would be. And also the disconnection in our head, at least, from nature. We are, of course, nature ourselves. But, you know, the kind of, So anyway, who else would like to share?
I mean, if you really want to zoom out and, you know, I guess go back like 10,000 years ago when we were hunter-gatherers and our kind of you know, we were very tribal and, you know, you only knew like perhaps 100 people in your life at maximum. And I think that's kind of holding us back. You know, it's not really conducive to cooperation on global level if your brain is wired to that kind of to that kind of thinking. So yeah, tribalism in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the industrialization, the traumatic shift to that, but I mean also the conquest of nature. I'm aware of time, so I do want to allow us a few minutes to kind of think that, because I kind of want to end on a hopeful note about that in a couple of ways and how it even relates to this group right now, which is that one of the things I actually would suggest, one of the biggest stucknesses, because some of it, I'm not saying that we should be connected with nature, that's all great, but one of the biggest stucknesses, I think, is the lack of possibility. And it's actually quite a modern thing in a weird way, which was to go back to something that Sylvie mentioned, which was the failure of our previous dreams. So the other stuckness right now is just participation in politics. People, I would say on average, if you like, as I joke, if let's say, someone says, to you like, oh, wow, I don't know, joke, I've got a young son. If my son said to me, I want to be a politician, Dad, I'd be like, don't, I'm joking, but, maybe I would say yes, but it's not like, we don't really think of politics or politician. Levels of engagement in politics, at least in like proper, like voting, is often at all-time lows. We are not excited by the possibility of politics. We're resigned. I think even in this conversation today, and I completely understand it, people, it's like, we'll never win against well, not quite we'll never win, but it'll be so hard to win against the interest. There are these dominant people, there are these companies, there are whatever. And I'm like, look at slavery. I mean, it may have taken I hope we move quicker, it may have taken a century, but the first Quakers, the first people who stood up, there are ways, and one of the things they started with was seeing human beings differently. In our case, maybe seeing the planet differently, but also it took, I think one of the crucial things is, for us, even with the stuckness, is possibility, that we could deal with this. That we could deal with this incredibly quickly, actually. In crises, look at COVID. I mean, it may not have been perfectly handled, but once, people have moved dramatically quickly on certain things that was certainly impossible. People have shut down whole economies for months. Like that was just unthinkable. Air travel. Oh, we have to travel. It's essential that we have to travel. I mean, Vincent, I totally agree with you. That's how I think of other people. But suddenly we had an existence proof that, the world could still function without maybe as much. Maybe it's not as great, but it wasn't like the end of the world. And that's one of our biggest stucknesses, is we don't believe, and particularly people, the people most of all who could make a difference, those people who are committed, who are people like you on this call, often we don't believe in our own power and in the power of the state or of government. There is no way this is getting fixed by the blockchain or some other descent. It's going to be fixed by a global agreement that has enforceable mechanisms for limiting carbon emissions. That's the only way. It's not going to be fixed by Elon Musk. It's not going to be fixed by going to Mars. It's going to be fixed by some global political agreement. But we don't believe in that.
Can I challenge you with that one? Coming from the technocrat, from the ideal, right? So just a challenge. What if we achieve the hydrogen-based society? Then we are talking about a completely different dynamics.
Maybe.
Right? So
maybe we can invent fusion tomorrow, and all our and my question is, we still consume like. We could deal even with climate change. We've got a biodiversity crisis. We only consume metals. I mean, I'm just saying, do you think that we're going to regulate AI well? Do you have confidence that humans are going to allow AI to develop in a really well-regulated and cautious and wise manner?
I think the point we're trying to say is that, yes, it's not like technology is great.
Yeah.
Technology can definitely help. But it's like we now have huge technology, but our way of being is this, our wisdom hasn't grown fast enough with our technology. And,
yes.
And wisdom, what is actually wisdom, is actually living like you're one, not like you're theoretically, we're all one with the nature and all of humanity. Is actually living as you and I are one. And if we lived as you and I are actually one with the ecosystem, with all of it, we would come together and make agreements to be able to live together as one. Because the thing of Rufus has to deal with one thing. It's like a little bit of our contingency that we're pointing is that often wise people are like, it's important to be highly realistic, like to really look at what is reality. And in that, and anchored in reality, stand for possibility. And from that, when you anchor in reality and you're anchored that we are fully one, there is no separation is a story, then you can actually take cohesive action. So sorry, it's very disturbing.
I agree with you, but yeah, with that again, I'm trying to think in a spectrum, right? If one person decide to do it completely other way around, then I'm just trying to see if that would fail or not, right? If everybody, so the AI, right? So if AI, everybody's trying to come up together and come up with some kind of the other way to regulate, right? So I'm hearing, well, I think what I'm hearing is a global consensus mechanism, right? So say for example, carbon has a specific value set. That's a global, the value set we just created, agreed on, and so therefore it has a value. Right?
There's a political agreement that would set
agreement.
Carbon emission, yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually transcend any value system, like any dollars or any currencies or anything like that. It now becomes the most important measurement of the world. So that's what I'm hearing. So that's extreme globalism. Okay.
I'm saying you've got. I'm saying that just so let's go back because we're getting one of the fundamental stucknesses I would offer as a suggestion is also that we don't believe. Particularly often people who are quite progressive in their thinking in the kind of political mechanisms that we could win and that we need to use traditional political mechanisms like the state, global treaties with enforceable mechanisms. We don't need to invent some new governance system. We have mechanisms for forming global treaties for several, centuries in fact. But it takes political will to have them happen. It takes political effort and activism and other stuff to have governments do those. But you
need to engage with them.
You need to engage with them. You need to believe that it's possible. And one of the things is a sort of, we're getting out of time on this call, but there's a belief I would offer that you can feel out there that the state doesn't work, that the state is bad. I mentioned a comment again about American popular culture, but basically it's not accidental that if you go back, let's say a century, and you went to young political progressive people, they would be joining the local political party. Today, they will probably be they'll probably be doing a startup and claiming it's going to change the world. And that is a dramatic change in how we view, for example, the potential of politics. And it's not true. It's not like a fact of the world. It happened for actually a variety of reasons that we could look at, one of which was the failure of utopian visions in the form of communism over the last 40, 50 years, which has massively devalued the possibility of political action, I think, particularly on the more radical progressive side in most people's mind. We could I'm running out of time, it's cool, but we could dig a lot deeper into why that came about. But what I would put to you is if you go and look at yourself and your friends and your colleagues, generally they don't think that it's much cooler to run a startup. People think Elon Musk is much cooler than most politicians, even though Elon Musk is doing nothing to resolve the climate crisis. Actually, if you actually look at the impact of things like Tesla and other stuff, well, political action would do it. It's just an example of the world today, of what we think is important and what we value.
Sorry, can I say something very short?
Well,
I mean, it's not general. Sorry, it's not specifically for this argument, but it's a kind of general observation. But I believe that we are a little bit stuck with our ivory tower thinking. And I'm a little bit upset to see this kind of, everything has changed after the COVID. And now we will go to that direction if we do this and that in terms of climate crisis. because if we are not able to address the unfair distribution of the resources globally, how if certain countries go to renewable, let's say, energies, what will happen? I mean, we are talking about, we ended up in a kind of situation with the COVID. Some people had the luxury, including myself, to sit at home and to be online and do this kind of talks, while others had to work, live, and serve for us to experience exactly the luxury that we experience. I think without really thinking those issues to make us believe that we're gonna save the world, it's a bit hard for me to accept. I mean, it's just a kind of general comment.
Who's saying that story, Jada? Who was saying that because of COVID we can now solve climate crisis? I think maybe there was a misunderstanding of someone who spoke. Because I don't think anyone's...
I didn't mean, I said that it's not specifically for this conversation, but there are this kind of general perceptions discussed nowadays.
Okay. It's all okay now, we've got COVID, a new world is going to happen kind of thing. I hear you. Yes, that's sometimes said. I mean, I'm simply pointing out that I think for me, COVID has been powerful in showing that countries can do things that were inconceivable, you know, prior to that. Like no one would have thought that you could, like before, if you'd said, hey, we really need to do something about climate change, it is a serious crisis that threatens, you know, people, realistic scientists projecting hundreds of millions of lives lost.
Rufus, sorry, can I say something very synthetically? Okay, I think that, I mean, what are you saying is really brilliant. For me, as a philosopher, I like very much your broad vision. But what I see is that, well, the Western thought since the Enlightenment, we have pursued an idea of progress, which now we pay the consequences.
Yes.
And we are like in a train that is launched at a very high speed and we don't have the brakes. So there are very little options to save ourselves. Or we jump, or we hope that the train stops at a certain moment. Because nature is much more powerful than us, much more powerful than all the industry in the world. Nature will reset at a certain point, and it's us that we are making the world in trouble. Nature doesn't give a shit about us. I'm sorry for the word, guys. One problem that we have is starting from really the roots, which is education to change. We have to really reform, for example, the education system in all the countries. Yeah. This is what I see, for example, as a teacher, you know, that sometimes we are still teaching to our kids things that are completely unuseful. The idea of progress that we all have, even with technology, etc., get in conflicts with, for me, what Sylvie says, which I strongly believe that what is this wisdom we are talking about? No, what is this wisdom? You know, actually we are born wise, but then pursuing a wrong idea of progress, we lose our wisdom day by day because we are completely attached to materialistic benefits to put our life in a very comfortable way, you know. As Jada said, if, for example, sub-Saharan countries, they don't have the resources that our Western country has, but there is no this big distribution of resources. We accumulate all these resources and then we distribute them at will to get profit out of them. So how to change this? Or we create we have to create other political parties, which are like in the United States are trying to do a third political party, but it's completely insane to have two political parties only, which is not a democracy to have two political parties in a country. It is not a democracy. It is black or white, which is completely two forms of dictatorship for me, you know? So I think that we really have to look at the roots and to be able to empower the new upcoming generation in a very healthy mental, psychological way. And this is a responsibility we all have with our children, with, you know, if we are teachers, with the young students that we are going to talk to. So this is my rant in a way.
I just want to draw out two things from it, maybe for everyone. It was very powerful in what Andrea said, both kind of, so one was it kind of ended in a hope, that, but you had a powerful metaphor at the beginning of this train that's kind of hurtling forwards, driven by the vision of progress or material accumulation, you know, the sort, Marx's metaphor of the sorcerer's apprentice, who has unleashed forces beyond his control. So the thing about that, so there may be many things that are useful, but I just want to bring out one thing, which is at least at the beginning version of the story, it became more hopeful, is all we could do is jump or stay on this train that was hurtling to the precipice. And that's not always the truth. Like, the future isn't yet written. There are many things about the climate situation that are, you know, are dire in many ways. But I just would say that it's even that perspective, like that, even there it came up again in the background. Like we as humans think with metaphors or stories, and those stories are useful, and they're approximations of the situation. And so only to draw out again, which is that this point I'm pointing to, which is one of our greatest stucknesses, is we don't believe that we can be politically effective in the timescale that we have. You know,
like we have to really get how let me freaking speak, how fucking resigned we are. We're so freaking resigned, and that resignation is what's going to kill us. Is the resignation to think we can't do anything about it. That's what's going to kill us, nothing else. Because if you really believe you could, like, if we actually lived, I can do something, we can do something, we have much higher chance to actually do something. Because if we live in the story, there's nothing I can do, then why do anything? Then you sit on your sofa and you wait to die. That's what we're doing. We're waiting to die as a species. We're waiting that lots of millions of people die in other countries that are not ours. You know, they flood our borders, and then we'll just deal with what we'll deal with. And we call it acceptance. It's not freaking acceptance, it's fucking resignation.
Or avoidance.
Or avoidance.
Pretending it won't really happen somehow.
And it is happening. And I totally see, like, and the worst thing is, like, we in the West are gonna have some consequences, but the countries who are gonna have the most consequence are already the one who are already suffering. And for that, for us to be willing to be awakened to our power, a key thing is to expand our compassion and expand our love to ourselves and others, to stop making ourselves wrong, to start being guilty for what happened in the past, of what is currently so, and get how powerful we are in our collective. For me, the participation to Untitled is really, there's something radical in the name, to be able to kind of clear away our trauma, our views, for the future to become. Because the future that wants to become, there's a child in the future. It's like, if I start polluting the future with all my resignation and all my trauma, I do not give any space for it to come. And there's a future that wants to come. And I think this is where wisdom comes. It's like, we need to take responsibility for where we have used our views to pollute the future and to not let it become.
And maybe on that note, we are at overtime. And Andrea is saying something but muted. Andrea.
Yeah, maybe because I'm an artist, I can say it, okay? I really believe what you say, Sylvie, you know, and it's the quintessence of making art for me.
Yeah.
We have given too much priority to our intellectual capacity, and we have put our spiritual capacity back. So if we really find out that we are made of spirit too, we have a spiritual intelligence, and we can rely on that, and we can act out with that, we can act up with our spiritual intelligence, maybe things come for a change. Maybe we'll change something.
And that's the possibility of transformation, that we can transform what is there.
It is not religion, it is not religion. It's what, all this subtle energy that we feel inside we have, that we perceive inside we have, but that we don't listen at so much. You know.
So just because this, we would love a longer session, but you can see the meat of this. If you look for yourself, one of the reasons, and it's not, you know, the point is, imagine, I often say that 10 organized people could change the world. It doesn't require nearly as many people as one thinks to make a difference. But we live in a kind of resignation at the moment about much of this. And this is one of the most dramatic examples, but it shows up everywhere. Who believes really in a dramatically better world, you know, versus some upgrade to our current one with small changes and tweaks? No one, really. If you start talking about utopias, people talk about the gulag. But I want to finish for today is to say, like, a radically wiser and weller future is possible. And that's what we're committed to at Life Itself. If you are interested in continuing this conversation, we're actually going to start running a series of probably weekly or bi-weekly seminars covering this topic, the politics of being. And if you're interested, can you put in the public chat? We're going to put the email, and we can then send you information. Doesn't mean you're definitively wanting to come. But we can send you the information. You can decide whether you're interested and whether you want to attend. And it's at hello at Life Itself. And do you want to put Sylvie at Life Itself, just your personal one if you need. If you are interested, they will be like probably 1 or 2 hours each evening on Zoom every 2 weeks or something like that, starting in October. And so if you're interested in those, coming to those, participating in those, contributing to those. And if you're interested, our commitment at Life Itself is to contribute to a large scale, help start or contribute to a large scale political movement within our lifetimes. And we do stuff right now. We do political activism and other stuff right now. But if you're interested in that, and particularly what I call this deep, the being or the ontological political activism, then please let us know as well, whether you want to come to those seminars or not, but you're interested in being kept up to date with what we're doing. Let us know that. You can just drop an email very quickly to us or message us privately in the chat. That may be quicker.
And I want to finally really acknowledge everyone who has been here, stayed the whole time, and engage in these uncomfortable conversations. It's uncomfortable to look at, you know, the suffering and where we're not acting. But I think if we can truly do that together, if we can go into the mud, then there's hope for a lotus to come.
No mud, no lotus.
Thank you, everyone.
If you want to go off mute, let's say thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, your spirit, your energy. If anyone wants the recording, let us know. We will share it with people on the call if you really want, if there's stuff that you didn't get to capture. And please message us if you'd like to be included or send us an email. Deep gratitude for your participation, your time and energy. Thank you.
Bye. We'll stay here.
Thank you.
We'll stay on here if anyone wants to chat.
Actually, I want to ask you a few quick questions.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, right. But the resign, I don't understand what the resign meant in this context. Yeah, because the fact that we are here doesn't mean that we are not resigning. And I'm sure that every one of us actually doing whatever we can at the moment, maybe not be able to identify the exact trauma. Like, so this is complex, very complex, the topic. So I don't think there is silver bullet. So it has to be the different context. Everybody is working at something else. And so my understanding at the beginning was how we collectively able to do this, because every one of us not connected. And so that was my initial thought. and we are doing it through some kind of the way we can communicate. So that I was looking for the language you use specifically, so that we can connect to each other. And so otherwise, we have to be on your platform. But unfortunately, our activity is probably different, and so therefore I'm not sure what would be the mechanism for us to be able to have the shared protocol that we can leverage each other. So that's what I was looking for, and then the design just didn't feel right in this context. So could you elaborate?
Maybe sometimes even vocabulary, what is it that we're actually really saying when we use word, and that sometimes it's like being able to kind of like have touch points so that we really can communicate, so that we can come together. I think it does take time. It's just, it takes time to really find alignment. What I hear behind is like, is there...
Well, to create a conversational domain, but not just like, a conversational domain is not...
Can I say something that might be slightly related or not? But the thing that for me echoed the more is like one and one and one can't do much. But if you bring it together, what you can do is extraordinary. And it doesn't mean we need many. It's like you need a few, like if the best way to kind of like, they say it's like divide and rule. You know, there's been like for probably a long time, the narrative of individualism, the narrative to not believe in the state have served also certain groups. And that narrative has been toned in for a long, long time to have us believe in individualism, believe in the lone wolf can do it, and believe that together we, like that government and coming together is not going to really cut it. And it's a narrative that has disserved us for a long time. But I've been doing a lot of reading of biographies and autobiographies of, you know, people who managed to create great movement like Mandela and Gandhi. And they engaged, they never operated as an individual. And often it wasn't that many people. It was maybe 5 like leaders, and they dedicated their whole life. But in their lifetime, Mandela, in his lifetime,
it took him a lifetime.
It took him a lifetime, but in a lifetime, the miracle, it was a miracle what happened. And India is a miracle. It took, but it's only one lifetime. If you think one human lifetime is a grain of sand in the speck of things. And I think that's what I want to point to, is like, if we're willing to commit, I can look you in the eyes and tell you this is possible.
Okay, so then I think there is an assumption that there is this vibe that we cannot make this happen, right? So that's why you're counting. You are saying the fact that you're saying that you can do this in our lifetime is the assumption that there is a voice that's saying that this cannot be done. Because I come from the assumption that we will get it done. Right?
So, can I say 2 things? There's 2 assumptions we were getting at. One assumption is we won't get it done, but I want to just emphasize the other is.
Yeah. Sorry.
But who do you want to talk to?
Andrea and very much.
Okay. Okay. But just to finish the point is to say is that it will be done via technology. There'll be some clever fix that someone will invent that will resolve this. Oh, we'll invent cold fusion, or we'll do this. My point is that there is not a belief. I think there's I'm not saying there's very little. There's often a resignation about that we will politically resolve this issue, and there's a kind of like, it's like Superman. You know, there'll be a Superman. There'll be some clever technological fix that will get us out of this hole. That I think that is more common. Elon Musk will save the world.
No.
Yeah, that I'm saying. But I don't think there's a lot of like, oh, we're really going to have a breakthrough in the climate talks in the next decade. Oh yeah, I'm really confident that 5 years from now, we'll have really aggressive emissions targets all agreed by everyone in the world. There isn't that. I don't think people are even confident that will happen in the next 30 years at the moment. There's a deep resignation about what we can do, even though society's made up of you and me and other people and their views.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
passionate engagement.
Oh dear, I just really don't understand it, right? So dear, and Andrea, you're still muted, so I can't hear you. I want to hear your voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We resign because we don't take action, proper action. To oppose, you know, Hamlet says, maybe Rufus, you can help me. I mean, Hamlet says, no, it's better to take weapon or to suffer the sling and arrows of the outrageous fortunes, or to take weapon against the sea of trouble, and by opposing them, try to end them. So, okay, we resign, but we feel that we are strong because, you know, everything passed by, you know, maybe we have a good position, working position, we have a career, you know. I think to my mother, she is 82 years old, she has a good pension now, and she doesn't care, of course, of changing the world, but I understand. But the people from, let's say, 15 to 65, you know, we have to use this life properly, you know. And if we go back to ontology and we believe that the existence is made, that my existence depends on your existence, because if I'm alone in the world, I am nothing. I am a vacuity, you know. So in this interrelatedness, we have to find ways to cooperate together, either with your work, with your profession, with your skills, together with mine, you know. So also this conversation, I believe they are like a hub to put seeds and to bring people to meet together. And maybe, you know, we can continue our conversation. I have an idea, you know, I know what you do. We can discuss it together. We can make something together. This is how we can contribute in our small way to change, and not to look the other way around, you know, because then we shut down the computer and then, okay, we go on with our own things. And then, okay, it was a very good conversation. Yeah. Maybe also this is okay, something enter inside, you know, but we resign when we don't take action. We resign when we don't take action, and when we see that things are not unfair, are not fair. I mean, that's what. That's what Sylvia and Rufus want to say. Resign is to sit, you know, instead of doing, you know.
I see. Understood.
Okay. That's what.
The more you resign, the more you sit, and then the more you sit, the more you resign, and the more you take action. Also, sometimes it's like, it's a muscle. It's really a muscle to stand for possibility.
Yeah.
It's not easy, because if you stand for something, you take the risk for that dream to be crushed.
See, what I'm looking.
That's why what is something big enough to be worth being utterly disappointed for? If you're not willing to be utterly disappointed for, like, you can't stand. And it's like a willingness to open our heart and be vulnerable, and like to be willing to kind of have that not work. And yeah, I think like that's also it is like, that's why it's like, hey, what is a vision big enough, beautiful enough, that is worth being heartbroken for?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sylvie. Yeah.
It's so good to see you, everyone. And
yeah.